Welcome to BNEWS Weekly Special Report. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my guest today, Russ Makiej, who is the water treatment plant manager down at Mill Pond. Russ has been with the town for 25 years in combination of the Vinebrook treatment plant as well as Mill Pond. Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
All right.
All right, let's start with a little history, since you know back from the days of when all this problem started.
Okay.
Okay, so we go back to originally the well fields were the primary source of water.
Right.
Then in '72, Mill Pond was built as redundancy. Take us from there. What were the events that changed the dynamic from Mill Pond being redundant to Mill Pond being
The primary?
secondary and to Mill Pond being the primary?
All right. So I'll do the best I can with the timeline. So back in the 50s, the wells were designed and pumped directly into a distribution system. There was contamination discovered, and they opted to add aeration towers to strip the volatiles from the well water, along with oxidizing some of the manganese that was being pumped directly into the distribution system. They also built the Mill Pond Reservoir, and this treatment plant came online in about 1972. And at that point, it was designed to pump, if you ran all three pumps, 6 million a day. We realistically can pump about 3.8 million a day, just because hydraulically how the water moves through the treatment plant. With that said, so we went through the 70s, 80s. That's in the 80s is when the aeration was added to the Vinebrook. And then
That solved the volatile organics.
it solved that problem at the time.
Right.
And through that time frame, through the 90s, I started in 1999 when the Vinebrook plant was being retrofitted with iron and manganese removal filters.
That was for
with green sand.
well number one.
That was
and
well
three.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10 and 11.
And those were naturally occurring organics, right?
Yes, and wells 10 and 11 were actually drilled for the purpose of being processed at the Vinebrook plant.
Right.
They're at the former site of well 7.
Okay, so the treatment plant here is built. Tell us about the reservoir itself. It's not a naturally occurring pond, right?
No.
It's a
Man-made off-stream impounded storage area. I thank Bill Keene for that.
Yeah.
It's our reservoir. We consider it full at 144 feet above sea level. It holds 512 million gallons of storage when it's full.
and we had 3 or 4 years of drought in which it looked like a meadow out there. What is its condition currently?
We've had that down to, we're about 118 feet above sea level during the worst of the drought. We were a little nervous. We had about 30 days or so of usable water. Fortunately, it started to rain at that point. John Sanchez and I and the staff were all thrilled. We were doing rain dances for years
Well,
around
apparently
here now.
you were too effective because it hasn't stopped
It
since
hasn't
then.
stopped, and this is the best summer ever, in my opinion, from a drought standpoint.
Well, if we have a big snowfall, that would be good too.
Right.
We also had the MWRA connection, which came
Exactly.
in as an emergency. That was vital at the time. But how do we source the water into the Mill Pond?
So the Mill Pond is filled from a pump station on the Shawshene River, which is just behind Shawshene High School. We have 2 submersible pumps there. They're designed to pump 4 million gallons a day each. Running together, we get about 6.5 million. It's probably just due to hydraulics and then pumping against each other. And if we run one pump, we get a little over 3 million a day. Currently, we're running one. We're filling the reservoir. We're about 8 feet below full, about 136 feet above sea level. With all the rain this summer, we actually didn't run any pumps at the
So that's quite a
Shawshene all
turnaround.
summer.
But here's the problem now, and the reason we're here today is to talk about the PFAS building which was built, which is as a result of kind of an arbitrary decision by the state. PFAS is a component of fire elimination foam. Our levels of PFAS in the reservoir was somewhere in the order of 70, right?
It's
60.
40 parts per trillion.
40
is
parts per trillion.
per trillion,
Per trillion.
which is tiny.
which is
Very
tiny.
tiny.
The federal regulation was 70 parts per trillion.
Right.
Sometimes, now, arbitrarily, the state decided that everybody in the state that had
Right.
this level of PFAS, even without any medical documentation that there was illnesses created by this
Right.
30 parts per trillion, they ordered everybody and gave them an unreasonable deadline in order
Right.
to start this. Okay. That brings us to the construction of this plant and the $15 million appropriation.
Exactly.
So it happened at an inopportune time, did it not, from a construction standpoint?
Due to COVID, we've had some issues obtaining supplies and materials. Construction supplies were definitely, we were told 6 to 8 months out to obtain the filters from placing our order. Pumps were in question. So what we're able to do with Wright Pierce and John Sanchez, and with the blessing of the select board and town administrator, we were able to place orders for materials ahead of time, rather than wait until the timeline, say, okay, we'll need the filters in 6 weeks, we'll order them. A lot of things were ordered right up front and delivered. They were able to start constructing the building, and then the filters arrived, they were able to crane them in place.
Right.
And
Well,
things
actually,
went very smooth for a project of this size.
We covered it, BCAT, as it went
Yeah.
along. But the interesting thing from a municipal construction standpoint was that you actually built the building around the plant, as
Right.
opposed to building the plant, building the building and filling the plant up.
Exactly. Yeah, and what we're doing now, it's kind of like just a pump around from our existing filters, goes to a transfer building, pumps through a pre-filter unit, which we'll see when we take the tour, and then you'll see the 6 ion exchange media filters that are removing the PFAS.
Now, the normal treatment process that was run at Mill Pond was for what reasons?
Just it's basic conventional treatment of surface water, so to eliminate bacteria, pathogens, cryptosporidium and giardia.
Things that happen in
Organic
a
carbon,
pond.
we have a lot of organics in the reservoir through the leaves and things that fall in.
Right.
They decay and break down. Part of our sedimentation process does remove that with the chemicals that we add.
Right. So that's called a flocking process,
Yeah,
is it?
so it's this sedimentation, flocculation, sedimentation.
Flocculation.
Yeah. Rapid mix, flocculation, sedimentation.
I've learned some new,
we
new
get-
things here.
Yeah, I can throw
New
some
words.
things out. I won't go too far.
All right, so you flock the material
Yep.
and
And then the solids, so the particles that the flock is, they collide and combine and settle to the bottom of sedimentation basin. In the sedimentation basin, we used to go down open valves in the floor and hose everything down with fire hoses. But
and flush that back out into the reservoir.
it-
But 25 years ago, what did we do?
they used to go to the reservoir prior to the sludge drying lagoons, yes.
Right.
Now it gets pumped to the lagoons.
And it dries out, and so you get hard material at that point. What do you do with
It's
that?
it's muddy, it's soupy, but we mix that with street sweepings and catch basin cleanings, and we have it's called a BUD permit, beneficial use determination from the state, and then that allows us to dispose of it at landfills.
Any chance we can make fertilizer out of that?
We don't want to because of the PFAS.
Okay, back to the intake pipe that
Sure.
comes in from the Shawshene. How can you be assured that the intake that you're bringing in doesn't include PFAS or volatile organics and things of that
I mean,
sort?
the only way would be the testing that we, an analysis that we do there. Right now, it's the PFAS in the reservoir and coming from the Shawshene has been consistent around 40 parts per trillion. Our filters are designed to remove, they have a life, so the higher the amount, the less life we'll have on the media. We don't know exactly how long it will be before we have to replace the media. It kind of just goes with the monthly testing schedule that DEP has assigned us.
So what is the protocol if you have, for instance, if you have a major airport fire that requires foam, or if you have a sewage leak, or if you have a gasoline tanker that explodes in the vicinity of the source?
We would immediately shut any pumps off from the Shawshene River and then work with a consultant, or I'm sure on something like that, there'd be someone from the state.
But you have a
to oversee.
notification system in
We do
place?
get calls from our neighbors if something should spill or they think it may spill to the Shawshene. Bedford will call and say, oh, we had a sewer station malfunction. Are you running your pumps? And then I'll make the calls that we need to shut them off.
So is Vinebrook now totally out of the picture in terms of water production?
For the most part, yeah. We've it's been removed by DEP from our quarterly sampling schedule. For the last couple of years, we've been running it once or twice a month out of a fire hydrant in the back to collect compliance samples.
Right.
So with that said, I think we haven't fully made it inactive, or we're not ready to decommission it at this point, but I think that we're close to that.
Close to that. And you mentioned sampling, which I presume is testing.
Right.
How many tests on an annual basis are you doing here?
Well, I mean, I'll talk Vinebrook first. Every month, part of running it to waste would be collecting 1,4-dioxane samples from the 7 wells. It would entail running some of those through the plant, some of them from a hydrant. testing for PFAS at Vinebrook on the effluent, which we're not going to retrofit for treatment, but DEP, because at the beginning of this we were using it for drinking water, wanted us to, we need to know what the levels were there. But at this point, the Vinebrook, for all intents and purposes, is offline, and we don't intend to use it for drinking water.
And here as well, I mean, are we doing 10 or 100 or 1,000 tests on an annual basis?
Yeah, even with the elimination of Vinebrook, with the addition of the new filters and the monthly testing there and monitoring, we'll do thousands of tests and analysis every year. Now we're in our water quality testing lab. We have various instruments. Our operators conduct 15 to 20 analysis every 4 hours. We do spot checks when needed. Our SCADA is our guide. We do have parameters that we set, desired levels of chlorine, phosphate, ammonia, free ammonia. And then SCADA allows us to adjust those pumps as needed for optimum chemical levels. The probe here on the left is how we measure our fluoride, and this is our pH probe. The little instrument here, we calibrate it before use, and then it gives us an accurate reading of what our fluoride level is and our pH leaving the treatment plant. The two instruments behind me here are a spectrophotometer and a turbidimeter. The spectrophotometer allows us to do hundreds of parameters of analysis. We utilize it mostly for chlorine, ammonia, phosphate, manganese, iron. This is our turbidimeter. It's how we check the level of particles in the water. We have different sample cells, raw water, filtered samples, and our finished water leaving the plant. All right, and right here we have our display for our chlorine analyzer. It displays total chlorine. It displays the temperature in degrees Celsius. And then up higher we have our display for our fluoride analyzer, and that tells us what the level of fluoride is leaving the treatment plant.
Okay, so you're running the primary source. Mm-hmm. What is daily consumption on average now? 6 million?
Actually,
million?
it's this time of year, we're down to about 2.4 million right now.
Extraordinary.
In the summertime, if we string together a couple 90-degree days, we can exceed 5 million.
5 million.
And that taxes our production. We can sustain for a few days. With the addition of the MWRA water, we should be in better shape to handle that.
And the current connection allows us for how much additional capacity from MWRA?
Right now, our maximum we've been able to obtain is about 3 million.
3 million.
3 million a day.
But that does not include the completion of the main?
Right, which should give us, I believe, up to 6.
To 6. So the interesting thing was, during some of the Finance Committee meetings, it was talking about making this plant redundant and relying solely on MWRA.
Right.
What is your cost of water versus MWRA? Can you give us a gallon price for that?
It's almost equal in the balance, from what I understand. Part of that part of budgeting, I'm not involved in, which I'm happy about. But that's Brian White and I have been discussing how we're going to manage the pipe versus mill pond production.
But from a water management standpoint, it makes no sense whatsoever to make this obsolete.
I don't believe so. If the MWRA should ever not be able to provide water, it would be nice to have the mill pond plant in place so the town does have water. You know,
they have had
mostly,
an aqueduct problem in the
it has happened.
It has happened.
And they're big pipes, and it takes time to fix them.
As a non-expert, I can say 2 is better than 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about how in the heck do you get 30 parts per trillion out of a water capacity this size. Tell us the process of PFAS removal.
As far as the PFAS removal goes, the water does flow through the existing treatment plant, runs through our existing sand filters. The water then flows through a pipe to a transfer building behind the plant. The pump's there, pump it to the PFAS building. The water flows through our pre-filters, which is 12 5-foot-long canister filters that are horizontal. Those filters remove organics and just particulate matter. They help keep the ion exchange media from absorbing the TOC, because that was one of the things we found in the pilot studies, is that our total organic carbon and dissolved organic carbon are the two things that we looked at.
Leaves and grasses that may have
general decay from natural materials. And so these pre-filters do remove enough of the organic materials so that the ion exchange media can focus on its design job of removing the PFAS.
And what is that media? I understand there's 2 or 3 different levels of elements that are in
Yeah,
there.
we have a layer of anthracite coal at the bottom of the filter, and then there's a couple feet of ion exchange media beads. And I wish I had some so I could show you. I don't.
And
But
is that for aeration?
it's actually, the beads are actually designed and charged so the PFAS adheres
Oh,
or it
ionization, okay.
absorbs, yeah,
Right.
and it exchanges the ions
Right.
through the
So are you
chemical
electrifying
process.
that media?
No, we don't have to do anything except monitor the effluent of the filters. When we see some breakthrough, we have lead filters and lag filters, and when we see breakthrough of PFAS through a lead filter, we'll switch our process to the lag filter as the first filter and put the first filter into the lag position and continue monitoring. And as we go through time, we'll have an idea how long the media will last for us here in Burlington.
So
'Cause
the ion beads are the last level of treatment?
That would be, it's the ion exchange media, and then it goes through the coal just as a base, and then the water from there. Then it goes to our contact, comes back to the existing treatment plant through a pipe. We add chlorine there, it goes through our contact chamber, and that's what kills any bacteria, deactivates Giardia, Cryptosporidium, cysts, and
All the little nasty little things
And then
that
in-
live in an old pond, right?
we add some phosphate for corrosion control. And
Hope you
some,
don't catch a frog in here every once in a while.
we do have fish in the filters occasionally, so we may see one when we head out there.
Speaking of which, we're still putting fish in the pond through the recreation
That,
department?
yeah, I didn't hear of any this year, but in the past,
Yeah,
yeah,
we've
there
been
have
doing
been
that for
trout
20,
trocking,
25 years.
which is interesting to see. I did get to see it a couple times.
Have them flowing out of the truck.
Right.
That's great. So, all in all, how would you characterize our current water situation? We're in pretty good shape?
Well, I think we're in excellent shape, and when we had the ribbon cutting ceremony at Vinebrook for the MWRA pipe, the MWRA likes to tote that they were voted the best drinking water in the country. And then after looking at some of our finished water analysis, we're better than them. So I'm happy about that. I think the town should be very happy about that. The water leaving the Mill Pond plant today is the highest quality water since I've started working here.
Okay. And what about the pipes in the older homes in town? There was always a complaint that the old copper, the cheap copper that was used, was affected by the hardness of the Burlington
Which is
water.
eliminated with the elimination of Vinebrook. All the minerals and hardness, well, the high levels were a characteristic of the groundwater.
So I can get an extra 5 years out of my water heater as
Yep, you
well.
don't need to install a new softener, you shouldn't, it's, yeah.
That's great.
It's so, yeah, it did actually, eliminating the Vinebrook plant does solve many problems as far as a water quality standpoint
Right.
goes.
Great. Okay, well, I want to thank Russ Makiej. He's going to take Tad on a tour. Tad Stefanak is our producer today.
All right, well, outside the window here, we have a rapid mix chamber. It's where we add our first chemical, polyaluminum chloride. That chemical is mixed rapidly in the chamber. It flows under the floor where we're standing. Underneath the floor, we have paddle mixers called flocculators. We were talking about flocculation. What that does, it keeps the water moving so that the polyaluminum chloride mixes. The particles start to get bigger and bigger, and then they settle throughout the sedimentation basin, which is underneath the rest of the treatment plant, which we'll walk through. This is where we add our phosphate. It is added for corrosion control purposes throughout town. The water travels through town with this chemical in it. It coats the insides of the pipe and sequesters any iron and manganese that still may be present. In this room here, we have cylinders of ammonia gas. We add that at the end of the treatment process. It combines with the chlorine and it forms a chloramine. Chloramines last longer in the distribution system. And years ago, we decided to go with chloramines rather than free chlorine. All right, behind me are our chemical fill stations. When we get bulk deliveries of liquid chemical, each cabinet has its own dedicated lock with its own key so that an operator can't unlock the wrong cabinet and mix chemicals in our storage tanks inside the building. We also have an eye wash at the end just in case there was an emergency. And in this room, this is our chlorine room. It's sodium hypochlorite, which is a strong bleach basically. And this is added as the water returns to the treatment plant from our PFAS filters. We add the chlorine there. The water travels through the contact chamber underneath the filters, and that's where bacteria is killed and Giardia, Cryptosporidium deactivated, and the water is made safer to drink. All right, in this chemical room, we store our potassium hydroxide and our polyaluminum chloride. The potassium hydroxide is used to adjust the pH up. We try to get up to around 9.0, which almost matches the MWRA water coming in. In the yellow bulk tank, we have the polyaluminum chloride, and that's the first chemical that we add in the rapid mix chamber. That's what helps the particles attach to each other and settle out in our sedimentation basin. All right, now we're in the filter room here at Mill Pond. What you see behind me is our automatic backwashing carriages. They, over a period of 4 to 6 hours, they will automatically run and backwash each individual cell here in the filters. There are 60 individual cells per filter. It takes about an hour and a half for the carriage to go from one end to the other. We also don't run them together, we alternate. So this one will run, and then an hour later the second carriage will run. If the water treatment plant were in operation right now, you would be able to see how we redirected the water from these water channels to overflow these aluminum weirs, which would flow down directly into the area that catches the water that goes to our transfer building. So the water flows through the plant, through these filters, overflows into this channel, flows back to our PFAS transfer building, and then the water from there gets pumped to our new filters. This is one of our SCADA screens that we have throughout the plant. It gives a snapshot of what's happening in the plant. It gives us online pH, flows, anything we need to see and an operator needs to utilize to do their job, we have on these screens. These are the submersible pumps that pump all the waste to our sludge drying lagoons next to the reservoir, the fenced-in areas. Behind me to my left are 3 high-lift pumps. Our number 1 pump is actually being replaced right now and out of service. That's why it's missing. Right now, we typically would operate our number 2 pump, and we have our number 3 set up as a spare. Directly behind me are our 3 transfer pumps. We typically, at a flow of 2 million or less, we would just operate 1 pump, possibly 2, just to keep their operating speeds down. These pumps pump the water to our new PFAS filters. And right here behind me, this is the pipe that comes over from the transfer building. All the water from the existing plant goes to the transfer building, pumped through this pipe, through the filter canister, back through this pipe, and then it's distributed through our 6 PFAS vessels. The 3 filters right behind me along this wall, those are the lead filters. Water travels through one and then goes to the filter directly behind it, and then they combine and the water flows back to our clear well. We'll do a show and tell quick. And right here we have one of the filters that go into our canister pre-filter unit. There's 12 of these filters inside, and these are the filters that are doing a lot of work to protect our ion exchange media.
Okay, that's it for our program today. I want to take special thanks and mention to Russ Makiej for taking the time out from his schedule to give us what I thought was a pretty exacting interview here. It sounded like you knew what you were talking about.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.